Hello, this is Bunting, and today's video is Tsuruda style sound design and arrangement using Vital and Ableton. Let's go. Alright, hope you liked what you heard because I'm about to break it down. You know, the arrangement is kind of lackluster, but I just wanted to slam together these drop ideas so we can get a full spectrum view of his kind of style and sounds, right? So, before I start breaking down the drums, I want to give a shout out to myself, right? Because I have a Patreon where you can get access to this project file as well as any presets I made in this video and all the presets and project files I made from every video. You know, and it's very inexpensive and supports your boy directly, right? And I'd really appreciate that. Just giving a quick shout out. Link is in the description if you want to check that out. That would be awesome, right? As well, if you enjoy the video, please like because that would help me out a lot as well. And it's free and easy. And subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Hit the bell too so you get notified, right? But let me freeze some tracks and then break stuff down because we're not wasting any more time. Okay, so first things first, the drums, right? As for BPM, a lot of Tsuruda's stuff sits on the slower side of things, you know, around 120 is where you hear a lot of his sound design heavy stuff, you know, kind of fluctuates to 140. And you'll hear some faster BPMs for his more trappy stuff. And of course, there's like other styles he delves into, right? But for the sound design heavy stuff, right, 120 is solid. But as for the drums themselves, right, you really need some knock-in samples, especially kind of trap, knocky influence type of kicks, right? This is from my Wave sample pack, which you can get on my website, buntingmusic.com. Again, supports me, right? And yeah, if you want a fat kick and pretty fat snare. In the heavier stuff, he usually just goes with the snare that knocks, you know? But in his weirder kind of stuff, you know, he goes for something a bit weirder, you know, trappier, you know, funkier stuff. And as for a weird snare, you know, just dig through snare to find something thoroughly weird, right? But if you want to up the weirdness, just layer a little percussion sample, you know, any kind of sample will do. Experiment with it, experiment with the timing of it, and you'll get some weird enough, interesting result to be passable, right? Whatever passable means to you. But if you really want your drums to knock harder, right, one thing you can do is get a Saturator, Ableton Saturator, turn this up, turn the drive up, and turn on soft clip. And as you see, that really gets that blown out, trappy type of sound, which we all love to see, right? I don't like my shit getting too square, because that's just absurd, right? But something like this, that is much appreciated. Another trick you can do, just to show off a bit more tips, you can throw on a drum bus. I like to turn the drive down so it's not saturating more, damp up so it's not low passing, and this decay down because that basically adds like a weird sub note which you don't really want. And you can turn the transients knob to kind of make it punchier, right, or less punchy. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, usually to your taste. Another thing you could do is just go to audio effect racks, mixing and mastering, and literally just take one of these presets. Yeah, at this point you're kind of over processing it, but as you see, these presets can go pretty hard. So yeah, that's how you get drums that knock, which are pretty important to Tsuruda's sound because he does not skimp on the fatness of the drums, right? But yeah, drums aside, okay, have some little hats building up here. Didn't put hats in the drop because I didn't think it needed it, right? And hats aren't anything crazy. But before I get into all this crazy sound design, I'm gonna just say one note. Little samples. I see a lot of the time on his live streams he has. You can just look up Tsuruda live stream to find the VODs. He's end up chopping up samples, right? I just use this for kind of a slight build, tension build. Kind of stretch it out with the BPM. You can click this stuff and stretch it out, do it all funky you like, have fun with it. Also transpose it. You know, all sorts of cool stuff with samples, right? But mess with that on your own. There's plenty of sample tutorials. This is about the sound design. So the first thing you'll hear in a lot of Tsuruda stuff is just these gritty, insane, sustained basses, right? And as you see, you'll notice a pattern here. There is a ton of Ableton stock effect abuse, to say the least. You know, Overdrive and OTTs especially, I think he likes a lot. I don't know him personally, but I'm willing to take a guess that he likes them, right? So let me go in Vital to show you what's happening. As you can tell, without the effects, it's pretty lackluster, right? All that's going on here is a sine wave, just like every other sound, right? With another sine wave, oh my gosh. Except I turn the level down so we have room to FM it, right? And basically, you can mess with the timbre just twisting this FM oscillator to knob. But as you can tell, not much going on in Vital. When you start throwing on these overdrives though, layering them one by one, you get a bit of a grittier, beefier texture, right? Throw on the OTT, that really starts to come out, especially with a few OTTs. Yeah. But one thing to note, which I'll get into in a second as I kind of demonstrate these plugins more in detail, right, is the kind of the clipping, right? But that's a foreshadowing. Let me just throw on an overdrive and show you what you would probably want to do. So basically, Overdrive, it's a distortion plugin, yes, but it kind of applies in like an EQ fashion, right? So you're able to sweep through the frequencies and kind of apply it to different frequency ranges. Another thing is you're able to turn up the drive, make it more blown out, turn up the tone to kind of color it more. Dynamics is more kind of color, right? And dry wet, you can just affect how much the signal is being affected. You don't really want 100% dry wet because, I mean, you can do whatever, right? But that basically ends up filtering the whole thing, you know, since it's kind of like a bandpass plus distortion. But yeah, more or less just mess around with it, especially in like the mid-lows, and layer them, and you'll get definitely gritty results messing with it for a while. You know, there's no absolute science. The low mids tend to slap. Also, it helps to get a tiny bit of grit on the highs, right? But all that is kind of subtle until you throw on an OTT. And really, there are no rules with OTT. You can turn the time up if you want a cleaner kind of signal, right? But time down makes it kind of dirtier, which is always welcome. Throw on another OTT makes it even grittier. A third OTT for even further grit, and I turned the amount down a bit because I didn't think it needed the whole thing, right? Now, one thing I see Tsuruda do in his live streams, and I'm about to start doing, is he messes with these bands on OTT, right? So he would, for example, just do this, right? Something like that, right? So you could just drag these out individually. This is more or less just like boosting the low compression, boosting the mid compression, boosting the high compression. And yeah, you can definitely get some interesting timbres, right? One thing I think a lot of his sounds benefit from is just having this absolutely slammed low end, right? Because for whatever reason, when the slammed low end like goes into Ableton's kind of like clipping type thing, it just sounds fat. This isn't the best example, right? You can hear it more here. It just really gets that fatness, you know, without sounding super squarey, which a lot of the time with clipping you would get. But I don't know. More or less, just twist these around, and you can get some interesting kind of blown out timbres, right? Yeah. But because, right, I feel like his sound kind of has this kind of clipping sound, right? Except not like square like that, right? I think a lot of the time what you just want to do is let it clip, right? Or throw a limiter on, which kind of keeps that clip sound without literally clipping, like redlining, which might be hard to manage down the line. Yeah. Long story short, overdrives OTT and crank that shit, mess with everything, have fun with it, right? And a bit of wider, because who doesn't love a bit of stereo width? A lot of sounds can benefit from it, right? But let me just move on to the next sound as I freeze this. So this next sound here is just a variation on the sustain bass. As you can see, literally the same patch, more or less, except I just went into Vital and removed the FM. So that goes to show how much you can mess with the sound just by removing one thing even, you know, and you can change the shape. You know, the sine wave sounded good to me, and it's an interesting variation, you know, and you'll find on this third track here, after this freezes, on this third track, you will see that same processing, right? Except I just went in and chose a saw wave, I believe. A lovely saw wave, if it ever loads. Okay, it finally loaded. This is a saw wave, except I turned up these unison voices in order to just add some kind of detune, which turns it from to very stereo and phasey. It's beautiful. We love to see it, right? But let me freeze this and move on to some other cool sounds. Okay, next up in the list of crazy sounds are these just insane riddim-y kind of basses, right? Even the sustained bass one right here. Right, you hear these sometimes in his work, right? So I decided to throw it in there. As you see, more Ableton stock abuse, to say the least, right? But let me just turn all these off and show you the original patch. So in Vital here, you'll see this original patch is much like any other kind of riddim bass, you know, just a square wave being FM'd by another basic shape or another whatever you want, with some slight modulation, right? Pretty much only thing in the effects is a multi-band compressor, right? But let me just turn this off and show you step by step. Here we have the LFO messing with the volume on this basic shape square, right? You get basic shapes from right there, which gives it that womp, you know, gives it that straight up movement, which you really need if you want to hear all that ringing we're going to add in later, right? And then, of course, FM oscillator 2, turn down the level. I turned up this pitch to 24. You just hold shift and drag it up, and selected a triangle wave. Another thing, though, you'll see is that I have this LFO here modulating this FM, which gives it that wow, wow, wow. Without it, it would sound like this. You see, it doesn't have that high-end kind of swelling movement, which you would like a lot of the times just for movement, you know, just because it sounds sick. And when you throw on all these delays, it sounds very crazy. More or less, whenever you hear this kind of really metallic timbre, it's going to be like a combs, a flanger, or a delay, which kind of function in a very similar way, right? So how do you make this metallic delay effect? So let's just drag on a delay, right? By default, you would think, okay, delay makes a thing spacey, right? That's when it's kind of going slow, right? On this like triplet rhythm or whatever, the beat division. But you can turn it really low, really fast actually, by clicking this time. And you can move it in milliseconds. And as you see, these low intervals just kind of create its own timbre. And you could duplicate them at different frequencies. Yeah, and you get really insane results. Yeah, for sure. I love this trick. It's insane. But yeah, and you can really just mess with the input into it to really get some interesting results as well. You know, pitch bends sound freaking insane going into it for whatever reason. You can change the basic shape, change whatever, you know. But yeah, possibilities are endless. But for this kind of preset or whatever I made here, you could just copy my results, right? I did a delay followed by an auto filter, which is just giving it that swell at the end, so you can ignore that. Copy the exact results or get it on my Patreon. Right, throw on the OTT with the time up high, just so it wasn't creating any more artifacts than there already were. But then I had a slow delay for that kind of slapback effect, which it's a slower delay, not as tonal, but it just makes it sound so big with it kind of echoing out in a ridiculous fashion. Right, but that's basically all the metallic basses you're going to hear. Some variation on this kind of formula. Onto the sustained bass, though. So as for this absolutely insane sustain type of bass, it's the same patch, right? Except I had another OTT and a limiter, so it clips, right? But I took off that one kind of slap back delay at the end, right? But beyond that, I did little things in Vital too. So in Vital, I'm pretty sure it's the same patch minus this movement. You know, you want a bit more consistent when it's kind of sustained type of bass. So I turned the FM kind of around here, you know, and removed the LFO from it, as well as removing the LFO from the level. This is just so it doesn't move around so much and it sustains out and goes crazy. But despite taking away movement, I decided to add some movement in the form of this pitch bend, which just makes it insane. Right, if you can ignore the CPU dying, just imagine how insane it sounds, right? But yeah, those pitch bends going through all those delays is just nutty, right? And you hear a lot of those metallic-y sustained basses in his work, like Caustic and Pathfinder and a few other type of stuff. Shout out Apex Legends, right? Now we're on to the weird trappy type of part. Oops, let me play it. And I'm just gonna go top to bottom and the sound design here. So the first thing, if it lets me go up, would be this trappy lead. You hear stuff like this in a lot of trappy stuff. Tsuruda is no exception, just because it goes hard. But he's super creative with it. So let me turn off all these effects so you can hear how it sounds without them. Alright, where'd the sauce go? No, that's still a little saucy if you think about it, right? You got to think about it though. But in Vital, you'll see, and you might be able to hear this, is that it's just a sine wave, right? Literally just a sine wave with this super plucky envelope, right? I turn the decay down, the hold down, decay, release down, right? And that gets it super plucky, which you want for that kind of percussive lead. Another thing people do for this lead, they just get a percussion sample, right? But I kind of made my own through the sound design, right? Now, because a lot of the sine waves you hear Tsuruda use, right? They all sound kind of blown out and like lo-fi textury. So what better way to do that than kind of coloring plugins? So that's kind of something like isotope vinyl in terms of makes it sound old or whatever, plus the color limiter. Kind of gives it some beef as well as that kind of slight lo-fi texture, which I think the sound benefits from, right? And a lot of Tsuruda's type of sounds probably utilized in some way. If not clipping, then like something like this, right? Because the color made it weird in stereo, I threw on a mono, right? And also these are I just turned off the wobble and vinyl. These are max for live effects, right? If you don't have this, you can use just isotope vinyl, would be fine. And like slight saturation, right? But I thought this did a good job. So yeah, Max for Live effects. If you have Suite, Max for Live is free and there's so many plugins on the website. Just look up Ableton Max for Live. Now the sauciness, where this movement really comes from, is this corpus. Now I've showed off corpus in a few of my videos and especially my live streams. But basically what corpus does is it simulates something being resonated through, right? So for example, it simulates this sound being resonated through a beam tuned to whatever 261.63 hertz, decaying, kind of like fades out after 1.32 seconds. A lot of times you can have it ring out, but I like it pretty low on the decay, and you can mess with the tune. And you hear this in a lot of weird trappy type of stuff. It's just insane. You can change it to a marimba, to a pipe, get all sorts of interesting results, right? And what I did for this kind of trappy lead is I modulated it, right? So I just have it starting at a higher tune, shifting slowly to a lower tune. You kind of hear it. Makes for a sick layer and just some sick, gnarly, weird movement or whatever. Now, because I wanted a bit of a stronger transient, more pluckiness in the sound, I just used the drum bus, right? I dragged on a drum bus, did the secret formula, right? Just turned everything like that and turned the transients down. Because turning the transients down makes the transient heavier, right? Shifts it more towards the front of the sound, but gives you that pluckiness, which is really beneficial not only on drums, as you could tell. Anything you want to kind of hit percussively. And of course, had to throw on the OTT, right, with the time up, just to make it super crisp and clear and gnarly, whatever that means. So, as you can hear, the sound is somewhat similar, you know? I have the same processing, except the corpus isn't moving, tuned a bit differently as well. But what you hear is there's and what is that wow, guys? I'm sure you can guess, right? If you can't guess, I'll tell you, because it's pitch bend, right? After this freaking loads, because this laptop is breathing hard, having a hard time dealing with it. Okay, we're back in, and it's a basic shape sine wave, classic, right? Except I got this kind of weird movement just from putting a LFO on this pitch. As you can see it moving through, playing the different pitches as it fades through. One thing you want to take note of, though, is that I put it on sync mode, right? Because if it's on trigger mode, that's just going to start at the beginning every time it hits, and I want it to slowly fade through each hit. So we have that consistent movement, not restarting every time. Okay? Yeah, so you get really weird lead type of sounds from that, right? Sometimes you hear he throws like a flanger on his leads, right? Sometimes you hear like a bit of the kind of that tonal delay I used on the riddim bass, right? And all sorts of weird stuff, you know, just be super experimental with it, break the rules, because Tsuruda definitely does. Here's something you hear in some of his tracks, right? So this kind of percussive vocal effect, right? Now you can get this by, I just use an acapella, right? You can use any vocal sample or any sample for that matter, right? But let me just get a hip hop versus rap acapella, right? And if you go into the warp, right? You have to turn warp on, make sure it's on, and have it on this beats mode, right? Just because that's one way to process it. So when it's on this beats mode, you can change how it warps, basically, to that it will stop. It won't try to fill things in if it runs into an issue, right? And if you turn it to 0, basically it only would play the transients. So as you see, basically all it's doing is playing the transients, right? These little peaks of this waveform, right? As they hit. But you can make it hit rhythmically. Instead of just the transients, you can make it hit every eighth note, or every 16th note, every 32nd note, right? You get the idea. And that's how you get that cool effect. All right, you can throw corpus on that, you can throw whatever crazy effects you want on that, have a crazy time with it. But I just threw an OTT on it to make it a bit crisper with the time up. Because some weird thing, I don't know how, but it kind of like restores the vocal if you have the time lower. I don't know, that's just something crazy that doesn't matter. But yeah, I arranged it kind of rhythmically, because if you ain't arranging it rhythmically, you ain't really arranging it, are you? No, whatever that means, but yeah, and that just fits into the groove. Yeah, all those weird leads done. This nasty 808 now, okay? You hear stuff like this in a few of his tracks, right? And basically, at the base, it is an 808, right? Which is a sine wave, right? With a short little input, right? Just like that. But it has this huge long tail with a bit of lower decay and sustain, right? Basically, 808, it's always going to be this release, which is going to, you know, give you that 808 tone, right? Otherwise, it'd just be a normal sub. Another thing you could do to an 808, you can always have a short envelope on the pitch and make it, you can't really hear it very well because of my CPU, but that adds that thump at the beginning if you desire such a thump, right? But the magic doesn't happen there. Where the magic really happens is this saturator. So if you watch my videos, you've probably seen this saturator on Sinoid Fold come out a few times. But basically, right, turn the drive up, it introduces harmonics to your sound, which you can visualize with an EQ, right? You see, introduces harmonics. But for whatever reason, the Sinoid Fold just introduces very clean and sparse harmonics, which give you that distinctly harmonic tone, right? And you can mess with the drive to change the tone of it, and the bass, right? Gives you that very deep, just insane sound that I love, and I think we all love. I hope you agree, because shit slaps. Yeah, so just mess with the tone of that. You can also turn the depth and the frequency for different tones as well, right? Turn on DC, turn off color. Yeah, have a fun time, whatever. But I threw in an OTT after this, just because I thought after boosting the kind of The lows, I felt like it gave it more of that Tsuruda style texture, you know, which is always welcome in my book. So yeah, I threw that on and it kind of added those artifacts, which I kind of heard in one of his tracks. So I decided to use that, okay? So up next, this kind of Miggy type beat, right? Which I threw a little wub at the beginning because you hear wubs in some of his work, and I decided to show off how to make a wub, right? You probably already know if you've been here, but can never use enough wubs. This is the only thing that's in solely in Vital. I don't think I wanted the chorus on it, but it stuck there anyway, right? But as you see, FM sine wave, you know, got the basic shape sine wave with a bit of level automation, right? With also this oscillator 2 pitched up, leveled down with the FM, right? But without this automation, it's cool, but it doesn't have as much movement, right? But when you throw this LFO on the FM, it adds some interesting, like, more wompy movement, which is always welcome, and because it goes hard, right? One thing you want to be careful of that I didn't note earlier is when you're working with sine waves especially, or any wave for that matter, a lot of times you want to turn the phase randomization down, or else it's going to sound different each time you play it. You know, it has a chance to do that because it's starting at a different point in the waveform, and a bunch of weird shit could happen. Long story short, turn this to 0, right? And you'll be better safe than sorry. Okay, up next, this Miggy type bass. Let me freeze some stuff so it stops lagging. Okay, tracks are frozen, we're more or less lag free. And we'll break down this bass. Without the effects, it's pretty sparse, right? So as you see in Vital, you're gonna notice a kind of similar timbre to the previous sound. And that would be the classic, the indisputable FM type of sine wave, right? I kept the level up, right, because I just wanted to input to further modulate, and it's womping at an 1/8 note frequency, right, with this second oscillator level down, pitch above, both sine waves, no effects except this chorus, just to give it a bit of stereo, right? But the real chorus comes afterwards, right? So I added an overdrive and automated this frequency, which might sound very good right now, but it adds a bit of subtle movement that sounds great when we push it into these choruses. This doesn't do so much, right? But this auto filter is what's giving it the majority of the movement, right? Before the final secret step, which I'll show in a second. So if you want your auto filter to womp, just turn the frequency down and amount up. Then you could select a rate for it to womp at. Right. So I did that on this, and I also modulated upwards so it gets brighter over time. Right, okay, but where's the sauce, you ask? It's in this Yo Man. Very Miggy-esque, because I think that's how he did it, right? And this Yo Man preset, it's just an Ableton preset, right? But basically what's happening here is it's a chorus, right? Obviously. But it's a chorus with high feedback. And with the chorus, you can change these delay times, since it's like having multiple voices delayed, which kind of gives it that stereo wide effect. So you can mess with the times here. You can change the delay to the modulator fixed. And you can mess with the rate as well, how fast everything's moving around, the amount. Yeah, and you can really go into detail, turn it to negative polarity, right? But long story short, the Yo Man sounds sick and super fat, right? You can also times 20. But yeah, that's chorus for you. Can you get some crazy results? It's a super underrated tool for sound design, right? But yeah, that's that. You know, and I have one little chord head at the end, right, with some coloring on it, and it's just sine waves with a bit of attack, pitch bend, right? Because you hear a bit of those sine wave chords in Tsuruda's work, right, if it ever loads. But just take my word for it, because yeah, we're gonna be here a while. Okay. As always, you know, all this stuff is on the Patreon if you want the exact presets, right? For this, since it's so Ableton intensive, I made it into instrument racks, right? So if you're not an Ableton, I'm sorry, you might be able to reverse engineer it nonetheless. But yeah, these are for the Ableton boys. Okay, yeah, pitch bent. You see, sine wave. That's it, with a bit of reverb. But yeah, if you want some banger samples, right, and you want to support me, right, Patreon, as I said. Also, my website, buntingmusic.com, where you can also get lessons from me if you want me to tell you more about this style and just help you work it into and make it your own. You know the deal, right? Be sure to like the video if you haven't already. That'd be awesome. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, also leave those in the comments. That'd be awesome. I read them and I do listen to them. You know, it might not be the next week I make a video, but it might be the next 2 weeks. You know the deal. Another thing is, hi, I'm big now, is Discord. If you want to join a community of producers, you know where it is. All in the description. Long story short, read the description. Thank you guys for watching. You mean the world to me. I'll never stop making videos because of you guys. Your overwhelming support. You make it all possible. Love you. Thanks for watching. I don't know what else to say. And peace out, dudes.